I'm going to record the meeting. So hello, everyone. My name is Emily Silence. I am the Development Associate here at Potomac Riverkeeper Network. So today's webinar is going to be kind of a little bit of an introductory session and also Q&A. So, for folks who don't know us as well, it's a chance to kind of get to know our work a little better. And also for folks who have been around for a while, it's a chance to ask questions that, maybe you haven't had a chance to ask before. So that being said, let's get started. So just want to do a quick little Potomac Riverkeeper Network introduction. So PRKN is, we work to safeguard and protect the Potomac River, the Shenandoah, and their tributaries. So essentially working through our riverkeepers. We utilize kind of a three-tiered method called advocacy, assessment, and enforcement. So, utilizing the power of the people, we go out and actually monitor our rivers. So our riverkeepers are constantly out doing assessment and looking for pollution incidents or anything that's being reported. And then lastly, we use enforcement. So I think that's, one of the main tools that we utilize as riverkeepers is that we want to make sure that those who are polluting our river are, have seek justice essentially, or I guess we seek justice for that. So we go through our riverkeepers, like I said, who are right in front of me today. Before I introduce them, a little housekeeping. So I'm going to ask some questions that people submitted beforehand after our riverkeepers do their introductions. And then we will go through any questions that people have that are on the video right now. You can either type them in the chat and I'll call them out, or you can raise your hand and I'll unmute you if you'd like to kind of ask the question, in person if it's a little longer. Just, be respectful of everyone's time, keep your question not, on the shorter side, or, doesn't need to be, a minute long, and kind of limit it to, one question, maybe a follow-up, but want to make sure everyone has a chance to ask their questions today. So with that being said, I will introduce our riverkeepers. So Dean Nyox is our Potomac Riverkeeper. He works in the kind of Harper's Ferry down to the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay area of our watershed. He is a strong advocate, I'd say, for our Potomac River, and that's one of his, what he works through the best. Brent Walls is our Upper Potomac Riverkeeper. He works from the Harper's Ferry up to the headwaters of the Potomac River. So he really utilizes technology, drones, GIS, to make the case for clean water in our watershed. And then Mark Frondorf, who is our Shenandoah Riverkeeper, who works obviously in the Shenandoah watershed. One of his strengths is really fishing. He's a fishing, he loves to fish. I'm sure he can talk to you a little bit about that. So I'll let Dean talk about his work for a couple of minutes, and then we'll move on to Brent and Mark. So Dean, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Thanks, Emily. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I'm the Potomac Riverkeeper, as Emily said. I'm based in DC. I live in Alexandria, Virginia. And obviously, there's a lot of different things that we work on. In terms of clean water enforcement, that's a big part of what we do. We have an in-house legal director. We leverage about $2 million a year in pro bono legal service to enforce compliance with clean water laws. So we protect and defend. We do our own investigations. We do compliance sweeps. We find, permitters. They're called MPDS permits, people who are discharging to the river like sewage plants or coal-fired power plants. And we find out their compliance history, and if they're violating their permit, we will enforce those laws. But then sometimes, like in the case with Alexandria's combined sewer system, we'll use legislation to fix that issue. We got legislation passed in 2017 requiring Alexandria to fix its combined sewer system and eliminate, essentially about 140 million gallons a year of combined sewage that's discharged to the river by 2025. So we're very proud of that. And we do our own investigations. So a couple of years ago, we were dealing with coal-fired power plant, Dominion Power, and dealing with their coal ash ponds. And so we started investigating. We found toxic seeps leaking into the river. We did our own sampling, our own investigations, photographs. We eliminated some of those discharge, but then they were applying for a permit, a solid waste permit, to basically cap these giant, 5 million tons of ash and leave it leaking unlined ponds, all these toxic metals leaching into groundwater, threatening public health. So we tested people's drinking wells. We found contamination in drinking wells from toxic heavy metals. We passed legislation in 2019 forcing Dominion Power to clean up 28 million tons of coal ash. But we also, do things like a lot of community outreach. One of the big things that I think is often overlooked with the work we do is engaging local communities and people in clean water issues, which we've done for all our legislative issues, obviously. But we also have a community science program. So we have like 40 volunteers that are out there testing water quality. I was just out there today, actually, for bacteria, and then reporting that to swim guides so people know when it's safe to go in the river. And we do this all summer long. We have a lab at National Harbor, a floating laboratory, and we just, work with citizens. We do trash cleanup. So any way that we can engage people in clean water issues, work to advocate for the protection of the river is really what we do. We consider ourselves the voice of the river. That's the licensing contract that we've gotten through Waterkeeper Alliance. And, that's a big part of it. The river can't speak for itself. So that's what we do, is we are a voice for clean water. We're a voice for the river. We're a voice for communities that care about clean water. So those are a lot of things that we can get into details about any of this if you have questions down the road, but that's a big bulk of the stuff that I do.
Great. Want to do a little introduction?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Dean, and thanks everybody for joining us on Water Wednesday. I am Brent Wells, your Upper Potomac Riverkeeper. I've been with the organization since 2009, and really have seen this organization grow in complexity and attention to so many different parts of the watershed that we were not able to when this organization first started in 2000. So, we, like Dean said, we are investigators. That is what we're doing. We are collecting evidence and data that supports our advocacy efforts. It supports our lawsuits when we are going after a company or an industry or a discharger. And so, we're investigating, we're collecting that information, that data, and then we're speaking for the river, like Dean had said. And on my side of things is I've been more of a tech person. I work with drones, and I brought drones to the organization about 3-4 years ago. So now we have one of the first drone programs of any Waterkeeper program in the United States and practically worldwide. And we have this formalized drone program where each of our Riverkeepers do have a drone to help us do that investigation. And it's really been an extreme help for our program. I have used the drone a number of different times and have used the images of those drones in a lawsuit situation as the primary evidence of pollution discharging into a river. And we were able to accomplish a lot of great things. So one of the issues is up in Pennsylvania, Specialty Granule Incorporated, which is a company who mines basalt and puts it on shingles. So those green shingles that you have on your roof, that's where some of this material is coming from. But they have a stormwater pond that was discharging into a Miney branch that was highly polluted visually, but unfortunately it did not measure a violation with the numerical standard. So you have narrative, visual, numeric, which is numbers. And so with the drone image, we were able to capture images and to show that visual impact to the stream. And we were able to use that to require and push the industry to adopt a $200,000 sand filtration system, which is the first sand filtration system that any quarry operation has ever put into a stormwater situation. So we're very proud of that. And another situation, the drone images were used on a 100-year-old coal site, that coal storage site, and they've stored coal there for 100 years. It's been discharging into the North Branch Potomac River all that time, every time it rains, and they have not sampled once any of the stormwater that discharges into the river. We are able to capture the images of, yes, this stormwater is polluted going into the river. They didn't sample it. We filed a Clean Water Act suit against them, and they ended up cleaning up that site and basically canceling their use of that site after 100 years. So it's no longer a coal storage site. So, you know, we're very proud of the investigations that we do and the use of technology. And I'm glad to say that the other Riverkeepers are doing just well with this drone program. I think that's my time. On to Mark.
Sure. As a Shenandoah Riverkeeper, we are confronted with a number of different pollution challenges. You know, we have legacy toxins. We have mercury in the river where there's still a fish consumption advisory from a DuPont plant that stopped using it way back in 1950, but yet it still impacts our river today and our ability to consume fish. Agriculture is another major issue that we are confronted with on a daily basis here in the Shenandoah Valley. We have 160 million chickens raised a year, 16 million turkeys, 580,000 head of cattle, and that poultry litter and cattle manure needs to go someplace. And if it gets put on land that there's an agronomic need for it, that's great. And it's good for the crops, good for the soil. But if it is put on soil that's already saturated, it just becomes a convenient waste disposal system, and that material washes off the land into the river and just creates the perfect conditions for heavy algal blooms. And so we've been dealing with that for a number of years. We started our Respect the Shenandoah campaign 2 years ago to call attention to algae. And the other campaign that we've been really successful at is our, Get the Cattle Out campaign, where we first started about 5 or 6 years ago. And there were 75 to 80 herd of cattle directly accessing the North Fork, South Fork of the main stem. As a result of the efforts of the Shenandoah Riverkeeper organization, Alan Lehman, we've been able to hammer that number down into single digits. And at this point, it sort of becomes a whack-a-mole game where we knock one down over here and another one pops up elsewhere. We've made tremendous strides in that area, and now we're starting to look at the major tributaries of the Shenandoah system watershed. And then the other thing that I just really have to talk about too is that last year we were successful in getting legislation passed. These cattle herds I've been talking about, we've been successful at the retail level, one herd at a time. And we got House Bill 1422 passed last year, which will require all cattle herds to be removed from Virginia rivers, not just the Shenandoah, but all Commonwealth rivers and perennial streams by the end of 2025. And so that's something that we've been, very proud of and worked very hard on. So I think that's enough, and I'll just turn it back to Emily.
Sure, thanks guys. So like I said, I'm gonna start by asking some questions that you guys submitted when you registered for the webinar. So I'm gonna start out with a fun one, which is to all of the Riverkeepers, which is what prompted you to become a Riverkeeper? I'll start with you.
Honestly, I'd read the book Riverkeepers, which is an amazing and inspiring book. And I had just graduated. I created my own major in environmental policy, and I was job searching. And then this job opened up, this Upper Neuse Riverkeeper. I was living in Raleigh, North Carolina at the time, and I applied for it, and it was 20 years ago. So it's been the ride of my life. I'm just very fortunate and blessed, and it's just been a great journey ever since.
Brent, what about you?
Well, I almost the same story. I mean, with the I kind of fell into it, really. I was in the Navy for about 7 years, and I knew that I wanted to do something in the environmental world. I can just tell you a real quick story. I was on an aircraft carrier, 5,000-6,000 people. And, when you have that many people in the middle of the ocean for long periods of time, you accumulate trash. And there's only so much room to keep it on the ship itself. And, there's some that is recyclable, and we would keep that for offload at a certain time periods. But for the most part, twice a day, we'd have an alarm that would sound off. The boat would slow down from operations, and you would have every single shop on the entire boat line up and walk to the back of the boat and dump their trash over the side of the boat. These huge, huge bags, practically fit an entire person in it, made out of paper, but, they were big enough. And, you knew that not everyone on that boat would follow the rules. People would put all kinds of different trash in those bags that probably should be recycled. And it just, this one time, it was in the evening, sun setting, huge ocean, nothing else around. We'd slowed down, and I was like probably one of the last shops to throw our garbage over. And you would see a floating line of trash bags off into the sunset. And that to me was just a stark image. And so from that point on, I decided to try and do something environmentally worthy. And I got a freshwater ecology degree from Huxley College, Washington University. And then found and fell into the job working for Just River Association about 15 years ago. So I've been river keeping for about 15 years. And it's been a part of my life for a very long time. I don't see myself doing too much else, to be honest.
Well, I came at it from a slightly different tact. I moved to DC, and I'm going to date myself here, back in the mid 80s to go to grad school. And I had about a week to kill before classes started. And so I threw my canoe on top of my car and my tent, and I came out to the Shenandoah because I had heard so much about it. And first place I stopped was Bentonville in the Low Water Bridge campground, and put up my tent and fished up and down the Bentonville area, and just absolutely fell in love with the place. And it was like, oh my God, I could live here. And so it just always was just totally enamored with the Shenandoah. Ended up becoming a military analyst in the Pentagon, and also moonlighted as a fishing guide for over, God, it's been 25 years now, I guess, on the Potomac and on the Shenandoah. And, the whole time I was just watch the river just like a hawk, just so closely, and, picking up just slight differences and nuances of what things that were going on. And then about, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, I caught wind that Jeff Kelby was going to step down from being the Shenandoah Riverkeeper and move up to head up the whole organization. And I thought, this is my chance, this is my time. And a lot of the experiences and skills that I developed, working in the Pentagon as a military analyst, really dovetailed quite nicely in terms of, reviewing documents, writing comments on very short notice, developing, recommended courses of action. And so I submitted my resume, and lo and behold, got an interview and made it. And so Dean Philip Musigas, our VP legal counsel guy, and myself, we all started on the 1st of March back on 2015, I guess, and been at it ever since.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, guys. So next question, and let me know if you guys have thoughts on this. Otherwise, I can help to answer this one. But how can an entity review your mission to determine whether and how to engage as a partner?
I'd hope it'd be on the website. I'm pretty sure it is.
Say that again, Emily.
Give us a call.
Yeah, how can an entity review your mission to determine whether and how to engage as a partner? So
If you like clean water and you want to get involved with us, give us a call.
Yeah, I think any organization that's interested in helping us, further clean water in the Potomac and Shenandoah River rivers we're interested in partnering with. You know, we have different opportunities. It depends on, you know, obviously what kind of entity you are, whether that's, you know, helping with a trash cleanup or a water quality monitoring program, or, you know, maybe a financial partnership or event sponsorship. So yeah, you can always send me an email, send our Riverkeepers an email with
Yeah,
with-
Emily, if I
with
could just jump in just for a second. I mean, as an organization, Philip Musigis is fond of saying that we punch above our weight, and that's definitely true for being a relatively small organization. You know, as Dean mentioned, that we get close to $2 million a year in pro bono legal counsel. And so when we find a polluter and we hit them with a notice of a 60-day notice of intent to sue, polluters know we're not joking around. They know that we're legit and that we're coming after them, and that, you know, we're going to be locked and loaded, and we're not to be trifled with. The other thing is too is that in the last year, we're in the process of revising our policy documents to be more reflective of the communities that we represent, and also taking a closer look at JEDI, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, to codify those into our documents as well.
Okay, so the next question, so I kind of pose this generally because maybe it's more of a general question, but how does a natural stream running downhill, and then it's a specific block in Baltimore actually, but so Baltimore, just for context, Baltimore is actually not in our watershed. What watershed is? I know it's the Greater Chesapeake Bay watershed, but which specific one is it in, guys? You know? Apparently not.
Not offhand, but I mean, not offhand, but I think, you know, the importance of the question is the fact that all these headwater streams are extremely important, especially in an urban environment, which Dean is more aware of than any of us. It's practically, you know, so much urban that's down there. These urban streams are delivering a number of loads to our larger streams. And, you know, and so, yeah, each one of those accumulates together and has a great impact every time it rains.
Yeah, okay. Another question that I got through the chat is more general. So how do riverkeepers find out about point sources of pollutants? Is it mainly calls from the public who see it happen, or is it more of a knowledge of plants, manufacturing areas that often have spills?
Well, all point source, you know, polluters, they have in Virginia a VIPTES permit, just a discharge permit, and they have to submit their DMRs or daily monitoring records. And we go through on a regular basis and we review those documents. You know, people often ask me, well, can't they just, you know, forge them and lie? And the engineer on site, you know, when they sign off on that, they're signing, you know, their personal signature on that, and that they could be personally liable if they are, you know, lying on these public documents. And so we review those very carefully. Sometimes things pop up out here in the Shenandoah Valley, and it may be something as small as, well, a valve failed in the manufacturing process, and you saw this spike, they repaired it, and everything's back to normal. Other times you might see something where it climbs, their numbers, whatever they are, climb in June, July, and August due to the warm water temperatures, and it shows that the manufacturing facility needs to be upgraded. And so you can look and discern a lot of information and obtain a lot of information from the DMRs. And then sometimes we get reports from the public, or we get reports from people that there's some, you know, shady stuff going on, and we'll investigate it that way.
We find out eventually. We do.
That's true.
We always seem to find out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we've had for the last couple of years, actually last 5 years, we've been having regular compliance sweeps where we actually review permits and go through a strategic process of figuring out which ones are more important, because there are some minor violations that, you know, we just don't really focus on. And that compliance sweep has resulted in us finding specific polluting entities, and which we take action.
Thanks, guys. Okay, so next question kind of directed towards Dean and Brent here. So do you have a time frame goal when the public would be able to safely swim in the Potomac?
Well, I mean, at least in DC, it depends, where you're at, but in the DC area, we have combined sewer systems, both Alexandria and DC, that discharge. Literally, DC up until 2018 was discharging about 2.5 billion gallons a year of combined sewage and stormwater to the river. So we passed legislation to fix Alexandria's by 2025. We've been in several legal wranglings with DC Water and DOE. But though that CSO system, the combined sewer system, will be fixed by 2030. So, the thing that I'm really proud of is I can honestly say this river will be cleaner in 10 years from now than it is today. And it will be swimmable, at least in the DC area. That doesn't mean that there isn't upstream threats that we still need to deal with, or stormwater pollution, which after a heavy rain can cause bacteria levels to increase, but water quality will improve in this area as a result of a lot of the work that we've done.
Okay, next question kind of directed towards Mark over there. How can I get involved in the South Fork of the Shenandoah and the Luray area?
Sure. One thing that I encourage everyone to do is to download the Water Reporter app. It's a pretty user-friendly app. And when you're on the river, if you see something that you think is wrong, or you see a cattle herd in the river, or you see someone dumping, trash over the side and into the river, you can snap a photo or photos and type in a blurb if you want and send it off. And the Water Reporter app automatically geolocates the photo where it's taken and sends it to, not just to me, but it will send it to the riverkeeper responsible. And so if it's happening out in the Luray area, it will come to me, and we can immediately act on it and investigate it. And then I would also encourage everybody living out here to get familiar with the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality. You can submit algal bloom complaints to DEQ. You can submit toxic algal bloom complaints to Virginia Department of Health and let them investigate. And I encourage everybody to write letters. And we occasionally, we try not to overwhelm our members, but we will occasionally, send out an action alert asking people to write a letter, support this, oppose that. And that's also another easy way that people can become involved, in addition to being a member of the Shenandoah Riverkeeper organization.
Yeah, it's an easy way to do that. We usually send out action alerts through our e-news. So if you're not in our e-news, or didn't click sign me up when you registered, there's a place to do that on our website, and we send it out through our website, or send it out through our e-news. Sorry. Okay. So Dean and Brent, because you guys might have different answers to this question, what is the single biggest threat to Potomac River quality in 2021?
Go ahead, Brent.
Well, so I have a fairly large watershed, 6,400 square miles of watershed, and it's generally mostly forested. And so I think each one of us would answer slightly different what is going to be contributing most to pollution. But I have a couple of thoughts on that. And, one is, for up here, we do have a lot of old, antiquated septic and sewer systems in these small towns, along with like in Cumberland, we also do have CSO overflows, just like they do in DC, and so we have a lot of older systems up here that is contributing to the bacteria pollution problems. We also have a lot of dirt roads and stormwater situations to where in mining situations to where it's putting a lot of sediment into the rivers and streams. And so we have that sediment pollution, and we also have the sewer pollution, even from this rural area. But at the same time, too, I think we're really embarking on some new emerging pollution issues that is really coming to light even more so. And we've done a Water Wednesday before on the issue of PFAS. It's a pollutant in firefighting foam and some other products like your Tefal pans. And this pollutant is called a forever chemical, and it is everywhere. And we are currently trying to assess this PFAS in our watershed, in the Potomac watershed, and working with state agencies to try and encourage them to move faster, especially in Maryland. And I know Virginia's got its own action plan, but Maryland is a little bit behind the times in trying to get things done and be quicker about this assessment and figure out where these issues are, what the problem is, and what can we do about it. And so I think there's a couple of different prongs on that. That's my view.
Yeah, I mean, on the really big level, nutrient pollution, I would say, is the greatest threat to water quality overall. I mean, you look at like in the Mississippi, in the Gulf of Mexico, the dead zone from nutrients coming down the Mississippi, 7,000 square miles, the size of Massachusetts. All the red tides you hear about in Florida, the Chesapeake Bay, the impairment issues in the bay are all from nitrogen, phosphorus, nutrients, and sediment. And so in where I live, where there's 6 million people in the Potomac watershed, a 14,000 square mile watershed, 5 million of those people live in my geographic area within the DC region for the most part. And there's a lot of urban stormwater pollution. So the good news is we've made a lot of progress curtailing, like a lot of the work Brent's done upriver industry that's non-compliant or discharging. We're fixing that. We're fixing a lot of sewage plants. Like we've sued Frederick Sewage Plant, Mattawoman. I mean, the list goes on, fixing Alexandria's combined sewer system. So we've made a lot of upgrades and improvements in water quality for wastewater treatment systems. They're, I think, easier to target. It's easier for us to bring enforcement action. These non-point sources that Mark is dealing with, which is agriculture related up in the Shenandoah, but where I'm at, it's urban stormwater pollution. The bay, you ask any expert, the greatest source, the threat to the bay now is stormwater pollution, both agricultural and certainly urban stormwater runoff. And it's the only source of pollution that's growing, right? Because there's more people now. When we have more livestock operations to feed more people. And so this is why, having 3 Riverkeepers, I think, is really important. We're all working on a lot of different things, but we know like the agricultural pollution that Mark is dealing with has a direct impact from nutrients down in the bay in the lower Potomac. We have a 50-mile dead zone down in the lower Potomac, or low dissolved oxygen zone. And then, we have, everybody knows about the pollution issues in the bay. And a lot of that is agriculture, and certainly urban stormwater related. So we got to get a better handle on dealing with stormwater pollution. We've got to get a better handle on dealing with agricultural pollution.
Emily, if I could just jump in, even though it's technically out of my jurisdiction, my watershed. When I give my presentations and talk to people about what's the biggest threat to the Shenandoah, and it's sort of a threat to the Potomac as well, I let people throw out ideas, and then I say it's complacency. It's complacency on the part of people that they're just accepting the condition of the river as it is today, and that they're satisfied with that when it could be so much better. And that and government officials, elected officials, they listen to their constituents, and if they do not feel the pressure that more needs to be done, more probably will not be done. And I encourage everybody to ask their elected officials and those running for office, what are you going to do about protecting the Shenandoah? And to ask them and put them on record and let them feel the pressure, and more will be done. But if people feel like they're satisfied with how things are, it will be the way things are.
Thanks, Mark. So coming back at you, next question. By any measure, is the Shenandoah River cleaner or dirtier than 10 years ago? And what is your answer based on?
Okay, well, I mean, you can, you can use any measuring metric that you want to. Are we going to talk nutrients, nitrogen, and phosphorus? I would say we're holding our own. It may be slightly better in nitrogen, but not in phosphorus. You can see, I mean, through the Chesapeake Bay program, you can see dramatic improvements being made in the Shenandoah Valley on the part of nitrogen reduction, on the part of wastewater treatment plants, and phosphorus reduction on the part of wastewater treatment plants. But if you look at reductions being made on the part of agriculture, it's pretty flatlined all the way across, and there's a slight reduction in phosphorus. And I would make the argument that the reduction in phosphorus is the result of the General Assembly removing phosphorus out of fertilizer bags at big box stores for residential homeowner usage. And that more needs to be done. If you're talking E. coli, I would make the argument that things are starting to improve. We're getting cattle herds out of the river, and we'll make that happen even more so in the next few years. And we're putting a much stronger emphasis on algae and the presence of stargrass and subaquatic vegetation and good grasses. And so in general, I would see that it is cleaner based upon the work that's being done, but there's still a lot more that can be done.
Okay, great. Next question. So it says water quality monitoring tests and frequency. Dean, you want to speak about our water quality monitoring program a little bit?
Sorry, you broke up the last part of that question.
Sure. So the question is water quality monitoring tests and frequency.
Yeah. So when we say water quality monitoring, we had mentioned earlier about doing our own investigations, right? So we do, so when we're sampling for when we're dealing with coal ash, we'll sample for all these toxic heavy metals coming from a particular facility to build an enforcement action against that facility, right? That's one way that we monitor. That's the way that I've usually monitored for 20 years. But more recently, we developed this water quality monitoring program where we're doing weekly sampling. And we're basically just focused on bacteria because that's a direct threat to public health. When I first came here, I was stunned that literally tens of thousands of people would be in the Potomac River on like a Saturday in July. And there was no data hardly at all. There was DC sampled 6 locations once a month, which is nothing. All that data went to a database. It sat on a computer. The public wasn't aware of it. And like down at National Harbor, where we have our lab, there was no sampling because it's in Maryland, and they do weekly swims there. And people would call me and say, "Hey, is it safe to go in the river?" So I was very uncomfortable when I first started as Riverkeeper here 6 years ago, answering that question. Rule of thumb is to stay out of any river, anywhere, 48 hours after a rain event. But the bottom line is our water quality monitoring data has really helped me as a Riverkeeper understand this river a lot better, and we have more data now. So if you can download Swim Guide app, it's a downloadable app. It monitors swimming location, 8,000 swimming locations around the world. Millions of people use this, and it provides real-time data. But the bottom line is, what we're finding is that areas near the combined sewer systems right in DC, where most people are recreating, are the areas that present the greatest concern. And so we post every week, pass or fail, whether that's meeting water quality standards for human contact or not. What we're trying to do is that people have this app, they know because there are long periods, like sometimes mid-July all through August, you'll go 6 weeks and it's safe for swimming all through DC. We want people to use the river, but we want people to use it safely and know when it's safe to go in and know when it's not safe to go in and stay out when it's not. And that's part of our education. 25,000 people downloaded Swim Guide last year and are using it. So we're getting a lot of attention. But, to be perfectly blunt, this is something the agencies should be doing. DC and others should be doing way better public notification. It really, we're the organization that's actually stepping in and providing that role of notifying the public when it's safe to use the river, when it's not. So download Swim Guide app. You'll see all our data every single week, all summer long. That's where we're doing our water quality monitoring, which is basically about a 60-mile span of the river. But we have about 15 sampling sites in DC area alone. I hope that helps.
Yeah, and I wanted to also talk about the fact that 2020, with the COVID and everything else, we really saw in the Upper Potomac a huge boom in people using the river. And like Dean had said, there's just no monitoring or assessment of these popular swimming holes for people to be aware of whether it's safe or not. And so we started a process of starting a bacteria monitoring program in the Upper Potomac. We're going to be working with Hood College out of Frederick, make use of the expertise in their lab and with some equipment that we're going to be purchasing, and start up a volunteer monitoring program next year to do basically the same things what they're doing in DC, and collect wiki samples and upload it to Swim Guide so people can see whether or not those locations are safe to swim. And I think that's and I think it's an important situation because people just don't understand the potential impacts of high bacteria levels at these major swimming holes, and whether or not, what kind of activity they should be allowing their small children in the river to be doing. And especially after a rain event, Dean had said that, just if it looks really muddy and nasty and it just rained like 24 hours earlier, it might not be a good idea to go swimming in the river. And that's just a basic safety tip that we've always tried to give out to the public when they say, hey, is it safe to swim? Also besides the targeted monitoring for investigations, we do collect samples on various different projects for advocacy related. And so we are doing we've been doing some water monitoring for wastewater treatment plant discharges in some streams, and now some fish tissue for PFAS. And so we can use that information to advocate for new laws and changes at the state level.
Thanks, guys. Okay, next question. Pretty specific. So North Fork, Shenandoah, outside Strasburg, has a major algal bloom. Is this being reported to state/local officials?
Kind of funny. Yes, it is. We went and looked at it yesterday, and we filed one earlier over in the Woodstock area, and the one in the Strasburg, it's going to be, it's being written up today, and it will be submitted tomorrow regarding Strasburg. Strasburg Park, I mean, there are a number of poultry processing plants upriver further in Timberville area, and Strasburg historically just seems to get a lot of blue-green algae down in that area. So we always keep a sharp eye on that. And so, yes, it is being reported.
A great example of how our community helps us find pollution reports, so, Mark and our program manager, Alan, didn't know as much about it. So they actually went and investigated when I sent them the questions. So very, very quick. Okay, great. So next question, Dean. What are the most significant river issues for the Mount Vernon area of the Potomac River?
Well, I mean, it's a lot of what I said before. I mean, in this urbanized area, urban stormwater pollution is just a huge problem. And while we're getting a good control on some of the point sources, the wastewater plants and industry, and there's still problems there. We're finding problems all the time. And we know the good thing is we fix each problem one by one. Sometimes it's a quick fix, like we'll file a notice of intent to sue for a facility that's out of compliance, and it'll be fixed within, a year or two. But like the work that Mark and Alan are doing, it's underestimated how important that is, because it's been going on now for over 15 years. They're finding one cattle operation at a time, and they're not regulated under the Clean Water Act. And they go and they file these ag stewardship complaints, and it's this tedious process of trying to slowly work to get these cattle out of the river, but collectively the work that we're doing all has a big impact for water quality. All the work that we're doing upstream has a beneficial water quality impact downriver. And so, I frequently hear people like, hey, this river's a lot better than it was. And, Mark pointed out, like this issue of complacency. The Clean Water Act is very clear that these water bodies, all of the water bodies in the United States should be fishable and swimmable, but we still have PCB contaminated fish in DC. And, you know, we have not achieved the goals of having fishable, swimmable waterways. This is what Riverkeepers do, is we stick very hard to trying to bring this river back to what it should and could be. And it's a huge task, but the more people we have as members, the more people are speaking up on our issues, the better chance that we have to influence the outcomes of improving water quality in this river.
Thanks, Dean. Okay, great. So this could be, you know, for all the Riverkeepers, but I know since Brent is our resident drone expert, what are some favorite examples of the drone work that's been done?
Oh, wow. I think one of the examples I gave in my intro with the SGI up in Pennsylvania, I think was just remarkable. It was the first time that drone images alone were used as the evidence, the number one evidence, the only evidence to support a Clean Water Act notice of intent. And they knew that we had them dead to rights for pollution. And that's exactly why they settled with us out of court and spent so much money to invest in a filtration system for the stormwater pond, which they did not have to do, mind you, because they were not violating the numerical standard. They were violating the state's narrative standard, and we caught them. And so that's probably one of my favorite examples, because it just shows the power of what we can use that drone for. Another situation is there's a mega farm in West Virginia. It's a 19-house chicken farm, CAFO operation that's being constructed, and we're using the drone to track the progress of that construction. And we're also using the thermal technology of that drone to find any potential leaks from the stormwater pond that aim after a major rain event, on whether or not there's going to be any potential issues there. And, you know, these drones are so unique because we can pop them up in the sky right after a rain event. The situation out there on the North Branch with the coal storage facility, I waited for 3 hours for a rain event to finish, and then I immediately flew my drone and captured the images of the stormwater from that coal piles right into the North Branch. And you know, if in other cases, we normally would have to schedule a flight with a pilot a month or so out and then hope that we get some good images. But with these drones, we're able to quickly get up there and capture images that we can use to our advantage. So, and, you know, I also love flying with Dean. I've tracked and helped Dean with flying a drone and looking at power plant pollution issues down in his watershed, and able to follow him and coordinate with him, say, no, you got to go this way. That's where the pollution is, or go further over that way. And so we're able to communicate back and forth while we're flying that drone. It's pretty unique. And, you know, I'm right now part of in the process of developing a 5-module training program for Riverkeepers to learn how to use these drones. And so that'll be coming up at the end of this year, and we'll hopefully you have it publicly available by the end of next year.
Yeah, I just want to add, like, you know, I've been a Riverkeeper for 20 years. The level of sophistication that we use for our investigations is pretty awesome. Like, we'll use the Riverkeeper patrol boat, we'll throw a canoe on there, strap that canoe down, we'll load all our sampling gear, we'll bring a scientist with us, we'll bring Brent, we'll bring the drone, we'll boat up into this tributary, anchor, drop the canoe, put the sampling stuff in, paddle upstream, fly a drone above where we're sampling, capture images of the pollution, grab a sample, come back, put it all in the boat, and get back by patrol boat. So there's not many waterkeeper programs that are doing that. And I think it's pretty unique to the work that we do and how intent we are. You will never find an EPA regulator, a DEQ regulator, or MDE regulator that will do that to find a pollution source. We do that, they don't. Sorry if there's any regulators on the Zoom call today, but that's the truth. You know,
another case is that we used it, there was a Norfolk Southern Railroad line emptied a large lake literally almost overnight, and they were doing it illegally with no permits, no anything. And we flew the drone up over this, not a mountain, but a giant hill back across the railroad tracks, to locate this that was not visible from any road, and we captured it on the public right of way, and got it. And now they're in the middle of developing a consent order with DEQ as a result of that illegal water discharge. And it was all from the drone.
Thanks, guys. Okay, great. So question for Mark. What is next on the Riverkeeper Shenandoah Valley Ag Nutrient Management Program?
Well, we sued the EPA for accepting Virginia's impaired waters list, I guess it was 3 years ago, and lost. We appealed, went to the appellate court, lost. But this continual pressure that we've been putting on EPA and Virginia, excuse me, Department of Environmental Quality, it's forced them to start acting. So now we're in the middle of the excuse me, Virginia triennial review, and DEQ is in the process of developing standards. Originally, it was going to be nutrient standards for nitrogen and phosphorus. They decided that it would be somewhat easier to develop chlorophyll A standards as a placeholder for nutrient standards. And so we're in the middle of the development of that process, in which chlorophyll A standards will be developed and be imposed. Initially, Virginia DEQ, they wanted just 5 sites where they would be, where it would be enforced. And we, explained to them how ridiculous that was. And, be the equivalent of a speed limit is only enforced in these 3 little spots. And it's just anything goes anywhere else on the highway. It's just ridiculous. And so they came back and they agreed. And now we're in the process of developing. It's probably going to be a year-long process, but we are developing chlorophyll A standards that will be used, and hopefully that will be able to start, again, putting additional pressure on agriculture to do more regarding nitrogen and phosphorus.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, next question. So someone saying that one of their partners is DC Water. So Dean, what relationship do we have with DC Water, would you say?
Our relationship with DC Water and DOE, DOE is the Department of Environment and Energy for DC, it is good. We have a good relationship with them. We butt heads sometimes. They propose an idea like, hey, we want to weaken the bacteria standard for DC waters. And we're like, we don't want you to do that. And then they go to EPA and they say, we want to do this. And EPA says, okay, we'll support you. So a couple of years ago, we sued EPA and forced ruling that they couldn't do that. We won. And they sent EPA and DC back to the drawing board. And then we sit back down at the table and we have nice conversations. And then they propose another idea and we say, no, that's a terrible idea. And if you do it, we're going to sue you, or we'll see you in court again, or we're going to fight you in the court of public opinion, but you're not going to do that. So it's like this, people don't ever see that. I think that's one of the most important things that Riverkeepers do, is this constant vigilance, holding the line always. And so, like I mentioned what Mark and Shenandoah Riverkeeper have been doing for over 15 years. I mean, people are like, well, why don't you do this? And why don't you do that? Like, a lot of people understand we're not just going into the General Assembly and passing legislation and we're done in a year or two. Sometimes these things take 10, 15 years. We have to go back and make sure that the agencies are actually enforcing, like, the consent decree or whatever decision that we got out of, like, winning. And that's really, really important. I don't know that. So anyway, so we have a good relationship with DC Water. I think the project that they're undertaking is huge. It's one of the largest infrastructure projects DC's ever done. It's going to take time, but we're just there to make sure that we're holding the line and that there's no backsliding and that they're actually going to do what they said they were going to do. And that's a lot of the work that Riverkeepers do time and time again.
Thanks, Dean. So another question. I've spent a lot of last year walking the Rock Creek and Anacostia watersheds. Does PRK have any regular coverage of those streams?
All right, somebody was asking about joining the water quality monitor. I'm trying to send them an email address, but
Sorry.
yeah, I mean, so we have multiple partners that we work with, like Anacostia Riverkeeper, Rock Creek Conservancy, and stuff. So we're sampling. You know, there's other groups that we're partnered with that are sampling Rock Creek, but again, all that data is going to Swim Guide. So if you just download Swim Guide, but I'm going to tell you right now, do not go in Rock Creek. There's a lot of combined sewer systems. Until after 2030, that it's a smaller water body. The concentration of bacteria is higher, concentration of pollution is higher. Definitely stay out of Rock Creek, but just download Swim Guide and you'll get all the data for the entire area. And anywhere you go, if you go to Miami Beach or New Zealand, you can find out the conditions of the water when you're there.
Thanks. Okay, I apologize. The last question is for you, Dean. So for the Potomac specifically, is there any legal action possible for the massive, overwhelming plastic plastic issue on the south shore of Oxen Cove, north of Wilson Bridge?
Well, thank you for the question. I saw it earlier in the chat. You know, I don't know what the legal action is, to be honest with you, but I will tell you we're adamantly working on this. This is something we just created, Trash Free Potomac campaign. So if you want, go to our website and take a look at that. We're just starting this. I've got a lot to learn on this issue. There's a lot of things I'm very knowledgeable about, but the bottom line for me is after 20 years of being a riverkeeper, I can't look in this river anymore and deal with and ignore this issue of plastics and plastic pollution and trash in our waterways. So we did just ban styrofoam in Virginia last year. We banned it in Maryland a couple years ago. We're working on a DC plastics campaign, and we're starting to work on trying to pull together a coalition of partners in NOVA to deal with the issue of single-use plastics. It's a huge problem. It's only going to get worse. And we've got to start dealing with this problem. Only 9% of all the plastics in the United States are recycled, and usually only one time. It's a myth. Recycling of plastics is a myth. We must ban single-use plastics. It contributes to climate change. And we're just going to start taking this seriously. So again, this is one of those issues where once we decide we're going to work on it, we don't go away. If in 10 years from now, we're still working on plastics, that's what we've decided because it's a big threat to the river. That's what we will do as an organization. And you won't find another organization that does that type of work for that long, that's that committed on that type of stuff. So we appreciate everybody who is a member. I hope everybody here joins as a member, and we appreciate the support for our work and our campaigns.
Yeah, so I think on that note, I think all of our questions got answered. I really appreciate everyone taking the time to, log in and interact with us today. We like interacting with our community, with our members, and because our watershed is so large, it can be hard to do sometimes. So this is a great space for us to do it. Like Dean said, obviously we do really heavily rely on our community for support. And to get our work done. You heard all of them talk about how much work we are doing. So it is really appreciated if you guys are able to become members, or a small donation is always helpful. So anything any of the guys want to say, I'll let them say it. Otherwise, I'll send everyone a follow-up with the recording for the webinar. And if anyone else has any questions, they can always send them to me or to our Riverkeepers as well. Any last words, guys?
I just wanted to let people were asking about the water quality monitoring program. Just send an email to lisa@prknnetwork.org, prknnetwork.org. That's lisa@prknnetwork.org, and she'll take care of you. But we greatly appreciate people checking in today and supporting the work we do.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you.